March 1942. Arrival at Stalag the 3rd B. The train screeched to a halt and American soldiers stepped down onto the wooden platform, boots striking the boards with hollow clatters that echoed through the camp. The air was thick with smoke, oil, and the damp smell of machinery clinging to clothes and skin. Each man carried exhaustion, fear, and the lingering shame of capture, a weight heavier than any pack or rifle. Guards stood along the perimeter, faces set and eyes alert, rifles slung but ready. The rows of barracks stretched into the distance, topped with barbed wire that seemed endless. Some whispered prayers under their breath. Others clutched letters pressed to their chests, fragments of home they feared they might never see again. Breakfast arrived in silence. Bread, hard and dry, and thin soup were served with rigid precision. Some men ate slowly, savouring each bite as a quiet defiance against hunger, while others stared at the food, unable to swallow. Conversations were hushed, measured, cautious. A private scribbled into a hidden journal. Every day I measure myself against honour and the quiet terror of survival. Work details followed immediately, sweeping barracks, carrying water, clearing debris. Each task, though simple, carried an invisible weight. Senior NCOs patrolled, eyes sharp, reminding men that hesitation or failure could bring punishment. Yet even in this strict routine, gestures of solidarity emerged. A shared ration, a whispered joke, a nod of reassurance. Letters from home arrived sporadically, censored and delayed. Each letter was a fragile treasure, read in secret, carrying hope and anxiety intertwined. Soldiers clung to every word, desperate to know if families were safe, if towns survived, if anyone still waited for them. Nights brought no true respite. Barracks echoed with soft sobs, whispered prayers, restless movement. Eyes fixed on beams above while memories replayed battles, hearts mourned fallen comrades. A young private wrote, "I lie awake, watching shadows. I am alive, but I do not know if I deserve it." Even the smallest acts of care, a blanket shared, a quiet nod, reminded them that dignity could survive captivity. Days repeated, yet within monotony, lessons of endurance, bonds forged in hardship, and fragile threads of hope refused to break. The days stretched into weeks. Guards patrolled, meals repeated, work persisted, yet small differences, a smile, a whispered story, a fleeting joke, brought light into the grey rhythm of captivity. Sleep was uneasy, haunted by memories and unspoken fears. Yet, each dawn returned the mist, the platform awaited, and the prisoners endured. Survival became more than existence. It was a quiet, April 1942, adapting to camp life. The days settled into a harsh rhythm, predictable yet merciless. Men rose with the grey light of dawn, each footstep on the cold floorboards echoing tension that hung over the barracks. Breakfast arrived silently, bread hard and soup thin, but it carried reassurance, sustenance, however meagre, and the knowledge that another day had begun. Work followed immediately. Some men tended gardens, swept compounds, or transported supplies across the camp. Each task, though simple, demanded vigilance. A misstep could draw sharp words from an NCO or a threatening glance from a guard, reminding them of invisible chains. Despite strict order, bonds formed quietly. Whispers in corners, shared rations, a hand on a shoulder. These gestures became acts of resistance against despair. Stories were exchanged, cautious tales of home, fragments of childhood and battle alike. One private wrote in a journal, "We speak softly, But the words carry more weight than rifles that watch us. They are proof that we still exist, still remember, still hope. Letters from family when they arrived were read in secret, bringing joy and sorrow intertwined. Each line was a reminder of life beyond fences, a fragile thread connecting them to a world continuing without them. The barracks were alive with quiet tension. Sleep was fitful. Men lay awake staring at beams, thinking of lost friends and distant towns. Some murmured prayers, others hummed songs remembered from home. Nights were long, darkness both comfort and torment, as shadows stretched farther than fences, reminding them of freedom lost and the enormity of survival. One soldier whispered to his neighbor, "Even in sleep, the war follows us." Another wrote, "I close my eyes and see the fields of Europe burning, hear the cries of men I could not save, yet I endure." Small acts of humanity gave them strength. Shared blankets, whispered jokes, loaves of bread passed quietly. These gestures were rebellion and survival alike. Each day was measured not only in hours, but in moments of connection, in whispered acknowledgement that they were not entirely alone. By the end of April, men adapted to the rigid structure, learned rules, anticipated expectations, and discovered the power in small acts of obedience mixed with defiance. They endured monotony, cold, hunger, and fear. Learning survival required more than strength of body. It demanded fortitude of mind and unity with fellow prisoners. Even amidst the grey routine, whispers of escape began to circulate. A man quietly mentioned a tunnel he had seen. Another spoke of a possible weak spot in the perimeter fence. Though dangerous, the thought of freedom lit a fire in hearts dulled by captivity. The men knew the risks. Discovery meant brutal punishment. But the risk was preferable to resignation. Every glance toward the barbed wire, every careful measurement of guard patrols became part of a silent, unspoken strategy. Hope, fragile yet stubborn, grew in secret corners of the camp, carrying the promise that one day the men might reclaim what had been stolen from them. May 1942, the first rumours of resistance. The early mornings were cold and grey, the mist clinging to the barbed wire and seeping into every corner of the camp. Soldiers shuffled to breakfast, their eyes distant, minds replaying battles and moments of capture. Guards stood silently, yet their presence was a constant reminder that the world beyond the fences no longer belonged to them. Yet within this oppressive stillness, whispers began to surface. Rumours of escape, of weak spots in the wire, of tools hidden beneath floorboards. These whispers travelled carefully, quietly, shared only with those who had proven themselves trustworthy. Every man who listened felt a spark of defiance, a spark that had been buried under exhaustion, fear, and the relentless monotony of imprisonment. Some began taking small risks, testing guard routines, noting patterns of watchtowers, measuring distances between patrols. Each observation was a thread in a larger tapestry, a quiet rebellion that grew stronger with every whispered report. The men were no longer just prisoners. They were strategists, plotting in shadows, their imaginations their most dangerous weapon. In the barracks, life continued to oscillate between routine and subtle tension. Sleep was fitful, often interrupted by nightmares of past battles or fears of what lay ahead. Conversations were carefully measured, every word weighed for safety. Yet amid these whispers and hidden strategies, moments of camaraderie flourished. Soldiers shared food when rations were low, supported one another through illness, and comforted those broken by fear. One private wrote in his journal, "We are like trees bent by the wind. Still we endure, still we sway, and still we live." The letters from home remained treasured lifelines, offering glimpses of life beyond barbed wire. Some letters were brief, others detailed, all carrying the weight of hope and the fragility of survival. Men read them quietly, folding the paper carefully, memorizing every word. Each sentence, each line was a reminder that freedom existed somewhere beyond the fences, and that endurance was not in vain. As the days passed, a quiet determination took hold. The men began to organize small groups, assigning tasks, sharing information, and observing the camp's routines with newfound purpose. Tools were hidden, conversations coded, and small maps drawn secretly in notebooks. Each act, though seemingly insignificant, became a building block for what they would eventually call the Great Escape. The guards noticed little, unaware that beneath the surface, a network of hope and resilience was growing. Even as the sun set and the barracks fell silent, the work of planning and observation continued. Eyes scanned the fences, ears listened to every sound in the dark, and minds calculated every possibility. The camp was no longer just a place of imprisonment. It had become a battlefield of the mind. And in this silent, invisible war, each man had vowed to survive, to endure, and to reclaim a freedom that had been taken from them. June 1942. Life in the barracks and the growing spirit of resistance. The morning fog clung to the camp like a silent sentinel, chilling every man who stepped outside. Breakfast arrived quietly. Bread hard as stone, soup thin and lukewarm. The men ate with a mix of resignation and defiance, each bite a small act of survival. Some whispered to each other, sharing news or memories of home, while others kept their eyes down, lost in thought, counting hours and imagining freedom. The guards observed quietly, rifles slung, eyes unblinking, yet they remained unaware of the currents of strategy and observation flowing beneath their noses. Work details consumed the morning. Men carried buckets of water, swept the grounds, and repaired fences. Every task was under scrutiny. A single misstep could bring reprimand or punishment. Yet even in these harsh routines, the prisoners found ways to maintain a sense of dignity. A man would quietly assist a fellow soldier struggling with a heavy load. Another would share a piece of bread or whisper a joke in the grey dawn. These moments became vital threads of humanity in a world stripped of freedom. In the evenings, the barracks were alive with quiet tension and whispered plans. Soldiers exchanged notes, mapped guard patterns, and rehearsed the small, precise actions that might someday lead to escape. One private wrote, "Each day I count my blessings in whispers and my courage in silence. This is the battlefield of endurance." Letters from home were treasured, read over and over, folded carefully, and hidden beneath bedding. They were fragments of a world beyond the fences, reminders of family, hope, and the life they had left behind. Sleep came fitfully. The wooden bunks offered little comfort. Dreams were haunted by memories of battle, of lost comrades, and the unrelenting grey walls of captivity. Yet in these moments of darkness, men found small ways to endure. They shared blankets, offered quiet encouragement, or held conversations in whispers. Each act, though minor, became a rebellion against the monotony and fear imposed upon them. The men began to notice subtle weaknesses in the camp's routines. Patrols followed patterns, gates creaked at predictable intervals, and guards grew accustomed to monotony. Observant soldiers began documenting these details secretly, every glance toward the fence, every note taken on. Guard rotations and every whispered conversation became part of an invisible web of preparation. The air of quiet defiance grew stronger each day. The desire for freedom became tangible, almost alive, moving through barracks like a pulse. Rumors of possible escape circulated carefully. One man spoke of a hidden tool, another of a blind spot in a watchtower. Though dangerous, the thought of freedom fueled imagination and courage. Every step outside the barracks became an act of observation, every small risk a test of patience and endurance. Men whispered to each other in corners, "We will endure, we will plan, and one day we will reclaim what was stolen." Life in the barracks settled into a rhythm of observation, work, and quiet resistance. Men learned the patterns of guards, studied the layout of the camp, and shared their knowledge in hushed voices. They assigned roles. Some observed guard rotations, others repaired tools or secretly forged papers. Small groups met in corners, plotting each detail with precision, each meeting a rehearsal for a day that had not yet arrived. Every action was measured, every word considered. Trust was rare but sacred, and the slightest betrayal could endanger everyone. Work details continued, outwardly mundane, yet secretly vital. While sweeping the grounds or carrying supplies, men memorized distances between posts, noted guard routines, and found opportunities in what seemed like ordinary labor. Conversations were coded. Gestures carried meaning. One soldier passed bread in silence, a nod signaling that news had been safely received. Another quietly examined floorboards, searching for weaknesses, imagining what could be removed or replaced for secret purposes. Each small act became part of a larger puzzle, a preparation for the day freedom would be sought. Letters from home remained treasured. Some were brief, some long, but all were read in secret, reread, and memorized. They were lifelines to a world that existed beyond barbed wire and watchtowers. Soldiers read them under blankets at night, whispered passages to one another, and used the memories of family and friends as motivation. Sleep was elusive. Nights were filled with dreams of battles past, fears of what might come, and hope for what could be achieved. Men lay awake counting the bars of the windows, the cracks in the fences, and calculating every possibility. Each morning, they rose renewed with small victories, another observation, a minor success in smuggling supplies, a carefully hidden note. These acts, though subtle, were essential. They proved that resistance was possible, even in confinement. By midsummer, the men had grown stronger in spirit and cunning. They shared whispered plans, experimented with tools, and coordinated efforts to study the camp's weaknesses. Hope, once fragile, was now a tangible force. Each prisoner realized that survival depended not only on endurance, but these acts, though subtle, were essential. They proved that resistance was possible, even in confinement. By midsummer, the men had grown stronger in spirit and cunning. They shared whispered plans, experimented with tools, and coordinated efforts to study the camp's weaknesses. Hope, once fragile, was now a tangible force. Each prisoner realized that survival depended not only on endurance, but on unity, intelligence, and the quiet rebellion of small, deliberate acts. Every day was preparation, and every night was a reminder. Freedom was not forgotten, it was imminent, and every act of courage, no matter how small, mattered. The camp had grown tense with quiet energy. Guards moved as always, watches rotated predictably, yet the prisoners' minds were alert, analyzing patterns and exploiting gaps in routine. Men began experimenting with small tools, shovels hidden beneath floorboards, tins converted into ventilators, scraps of clothing transformed into disguises. The sense of purpose grew, each day a rehearsal for what might someday become a bold, dangerous attempt at freedom. Conversations were coded, notebooks hidden beneath mattresses, floorboards lifted in secret. Observers recorded every detail, the distance between towers, the timing of patrols, the habits of guards. The prisoners began to understand the rhythms of captivity, and within these rhythms, they found opportunities. One soldier wrote, "We are learning to live in the shadow of freedom, and in that shadow, we find strength." Daily labor became an act of subtle defiance. While appearing to sweep, scrub, or carry water, men counted paces, measured gaits, and noted weaknesses. Each action contributed to a growing network of knowledge, slowly knitting a plan that only those deemed trustworthy would ever know. The camp, outwardly orderly, had become a hive of quiet resistance. Every glance at the fences, every note passed under blankets, every cautious step outside the barracks reinforced the promise. They would survive, endure, and reclaim the life stolen from them. Freedom remained distant but possible, tangible in every whispered plan and every act of careful defiance. The seeds of the Great Escape had been sown, and in the hearts of American POWs, courage grew stronger with each passing day. The air was sharp with winter's chill, biting at faces and hands alike. Stalag Luft III lay deep within the pine forests of Poland, its double rows of barbed wire and watchtowers forming a fortress designed to hold men permanently. For most, it was hopeless, a cage of grey, monotony and fear. But to Roger Bushell, now known as Big X, it was a battlefield of the mind. He observed routines, noting guard rotations, watchtower schedules, and the patterns of the barracks. Each detail was a clue, each act of attention a seed for rebellion. Bushell's reputation grew quickly. Among the Allied airmen, British, Canadian, American, and Australian, he became a symbol of defiance and hope. He gathered trusted men in secret, sharing ideas and plans, inspiring confidence. The mission was clear. Escape was not just personal survival. It was a duty, a strategy to disrupt the enemy and reclaim freedom. The men began to organize into teams, each with roles tailored to skills and talents. Diggers, carpenters, forgers, tailors, and lookouts. Every man understood that the smallest contribution could have monumental impact. 3 tunnels were planned, codenamed Tom, Dick, and Harry. Each tunnel had to reach far beyond the camp's perimeter, deep enough to avoid detection. Diggers worked tirelessly, inch by inch, using bedboards as shovels and tin cans to carry out sand. The soil, pale and shifting, required careful reinforcement with scavenged wood. Ventilation was improvised from bits of old clothing and tins, a system that allowed fresh air to reach men working underground. Every night, the faint scraping of shovels echoed through darkness like a heartbeat of rebellion. The disposal of sand became a meticulous art. Men carried it in hidden pouches sewn into trousers, then released it during exercise in a slow, deliberate shuffle known as penguining. The motion was odd, comical, even, yet vital. Guards, unaware, walked past as sand fell quietly into the earth, erasing traces of their underground work. In the grey light of dawn, the camp appeared calm, but beneath, a vast network of preparation and defiance thrived. The first tunnel, Tom, had been discovered and sealed by the Germans, a crushing blow to morale. But Big X remained undeterred. He redirected efforts to Harry, the tunnel that would ultimately be their path to freedom. The work was grueling, the soil cold and wet. The Big X supervised workshops that produced forged identity papers, ration cards, and civilian clothing. Nothing escaped his attention. Every man understood the danger. Discovery could lead to punishment or worse. Yet morale thrived in subtle defiance. Humor, whispered encouragements, and shared moments of camaraderie bolstered spirits. Prisoners were no longer passive captives. They were soldiers again, fighting an invisible enemy with ingenuity and determination. Even the smallest victories reinforced hope. A bent nail replaced, a ventilation system adjusted, a bag of sand hidden successfully. Each act was proof that their labor mattered. The camp itself became a theater of calculated deception. Guards, trained to observe, missed the details most vital to escape. Every glance, step, and action was deliberate, a choreography of defiance hidden beneath ordinary appearances. The winter months stretched endlessly. Cold seeped into bones, frost clung to barracks, and darkness extended its hours. Yet the heartbeat of rebellion persisted, pounding beneath floorboards, echoing in hidden chambers, and living in the minds of every man who dared to dream of freedom. Each day reinforced the reality that survival depended not only on patience and skill, but on courage, collaboration, and the refusal to yield to despair. By early March, Harry was nearly complete. Hundreds of men were involved in the operation, each performing tasks with precision. The tunnel stretched hundreds of feet beneath the camp, reinforced with stolen wood, ventilated by handmade bellows, and shrouded in secrecy. Big X ensured that the operation moved smoothly, quietly encouraging men, checking every detail, and coordinating small workshops that produced the tools of freedom. Forged papers, civilian clothing, and ration cards, the men rehearsed their movements. Each step out of the barracks, each entrance to the tunnel, and every exit point beyond the perimeter was studied, timed, and refined. They knew the danger. Discovery could mean death. Yet hope outweighed fear. Each man prepared mentally, visualizing forests beyond the fence, imagining towns and roads, rehearsing routes that would carry them toward liberation. Discipline and unity were essential. Communication was subtle, coded, almost invisible. Men relied on gestures, small signals, and careful observation. Laughter persisted in quiet moments, a balm against fear. The camp, seemingly asleep under winter's frost, hummed with life beneath the surface. The Great Escape, long months in preparation, was poised to become one of the most daring acts of resistance in history. As night fell, men took their positions. The first wave of diggers and planners would move silently through the tunnel, shadows flickering in candlelight, hearts pounding with anticipation. Outside, the camp appeared calm, unaware of the invisible army preparing to reclaim freedom. Every breath was a promise, every step a defiance, and every shovel stroke a declaration. They would not surrender their spirit, their courage, or their humanity. March 24th, 1944, the night of the Great Escape. The night was cold, the frost coating every surface in silver. Darkness pressed against the camp as men moved silently toward the tunnel. Harry, hearts pounded beneath patched uniforms, breath visible in the frigid air. Big X, Roger Bushell, moved among them, whispering last-minute instructions, steadying nerves, and reminding men that courage was their greatest weapon. The camp appeared tranquil, yet beneath the surface, the hum of activity and anticipation vibrated like a heartbeat. The first men entered the tunnel, one by one. Candles flickered against the dirt walls, casting trembling shadows. The faint scrape of shovels and the careful shuffle of feet echoed like the rhythm of determination. Outside, guards patrolled unaware of the movement beneath their feet. Men carried forged papers, civilian clothing, and ration cards, each item a lifeline to survival. They climbed through the tunnel, emerged into the forest, and melted into shadows, hearts racing with a mix of hope and terror. The operation was precise. Teams moved at intervals, each man knowing his role, timing rehearsed meticulously over months. Big X oversaw every detail from within the camp, ensuring the flow remained uninterrupted. The sound of the outside world, the wind in the trees, distant shouts, the creak of the camp, reminded them of the stakes. For each man, every step was a step toward freedom, a defiance against captivity, and an assertion that courage could never be confined. March 25-26, 1944. Pursuit and capture. Freedom was fleeting. Once beyond the camp, men scattered into small groups, moving silently through the forest and fields. Every shadow was a threat, every distant sound a warning. German patrols, alerted to the escape, swept the countryside. Men were captured, returned to camps, interrogated, and sometimes beaten. Yet even in defeat, morale endured. Big X himself was caught after days of evasion, blending with civilians, yet eventually recognized. The aftermath was devastating. 50 men, selected in reprisal, were executed by the Gestapo. Their bodies left as warnings, their courage immortalized in silence. The camp mourned quietly, sharing grief in whispers, honoring those who had sacrificed life for hope. Yet even in tragedy, the escape had demonstrated the indomitable spirit of the men, showing that defiance could thrive even in captivity. The effort had drained enemy resources, disrupted routine, and sent a message that freedom was a force impossible to extinguish. Men returned to barracks, changed. Those who survived carried memories of the forest, the risk, and the fleeting taste of liberty. Conversations were quiet but profound, recounting every detail, every decision, and every act of bravery. Letters to home, journals, and whispered recollections preserved the courage and ingenuity displayed. Even as fear lingered, hope endured. The Great Escape had become legend, a testament to human resilience, and a reminder that captivity could never fully conquer the spirit. Spring 1945, liberation of Stalag Luft III. Over a year later, Allied forces liberated Stalag Luft III. Prisoners emerged into sunlight that felt almost unreal after years in grey barracks. The camp lay in ruins, yet the spirit of those who had survived, struggled, and resisted remained intact. Men embraced, tears and laughter mingling, stories of survival and escape shared in hushed, reverent tones. Journals, letters, and memories were exchanged, weaving together a history of resilience and courage that would endure far beyond the fences. Reflections were bittersweet. Survivors mourned the 50 executed, remembered the hardships endured, and honoured comrades who had sacrificed everything. Yet amidst grief, they also celebrated ingenuity, camaraderie, and the quiet victories that had kept them alive. Even in captivity, the human mind and heart had found ways to resist, to plan, and to hope. Liberation confirmed that their struggle had purpose, that endurance had meaning, and that courage could not be confined by barbed wire. As men prepared to return home, they carried more than memories of hardship. They carried lessons of perseverance, unity, and ingenuity. They carried the knowledge that resistance, even in the smallest acts, was powerful. The Great Escape had ended physically, but its spirit endured, etched in the hearts of those who had dared to defy imprisonment. And in the legacy of courage, It left for generations to come. May 1945. Life beyond captivity. Men walked through the ruins of the camp, breathing fresh air, feeling sunlight on their faces for the first time in years. Conversations were filled with disbelief, relief, and the surreal sensation of freedom regained. Yet memory lingered. They thought of those who had died, of friends never seen again, and of the relentless vigilance that had become a way of life. Each step forward carried gratitude and a profound understanding of endurance. Stories were shared, carefully recorded, passed down through letters, journals, and quiet conversations. They spoke of tunnels, hidden tools, clever disguises, and acts of courage that defied the oppressive machinery of war. Every escape attempt, every act of subtle defiance, was proof that humanity could persist even in the darkest circumstances. By summer, men returned to towns and families. The memory of captivity never fully faded, yet the lessons endured. Courage in adversity, solidarity among comrades, and the unyielding drive to survive. The Great Escape became not just a story of fleeing confinement, but a testament to the human spirit's capacity for hope, ingenuity, and resilience. Even after years of darkness, men had emerged, carrying with them proof that captivity could challenge but never fully extinguish the will to live free.